No one walked near Cell 9, not even the bravest alien guards. They all knew what lived behind that thick steel door, a creature so big, so powerful, so silent that even the walls seemed afraid of her. She was known only by her number, XG49, but in whispers they called her the Towering Shadow. Twice the height of most alien soldiers, with skin like dark stone and eyes that glowed faint blue, she had once torn a battle mech apart with her bare hands. Since then, no one dared come close. Every day, guards passed her cell quickly. Eyes forward, heads low. They left her food by a wall chute, never face to face. And every day she sat in the corner, chained, silent, and still as a statue. But then one day something changed. A human janitor was assigned to clean the lower decks. His name was Theo. Not a soldier, not a scientist. Just a regular man with a mop and a cart. He had no idea what Cell 9 was. As Theo turned the corner, he stopped. There it was, the largest reinforced cell he had ever seen. And inside, behind the force field, sat her, eyes closed, chained hands resting on the cold floor. He didn't feel fear, not right away. He felt something else, curiosity. He stepped closer. Ignoring the warning signs on the wall, the air seemed heavier near her cell. Theo looked through the field and whispered, "Hey, can you hear me?" The giantess didn't move, didn't speak. He waited, then shrugged and turned to clean the floor. But before he could walk away, he heard a low growl, a sound like a distant storm building. She had opened her eyes. Two glowing blue eyes stared right at him. No words, just silence. Theo's heart jumped. But he didn't run. Instead, he did something no one had ever done in years. He smiled, just a small, honest smile. Like he would give anyone else on a normal day then. He said softly, "Nice to meet you," and continued mopping the floor. The next day, Theo came again. This time, he brought music. Old human tunes played from a tiny speaker on his cart as he cleaned. He didn't speak much, didn't ask questions, he just existed near her. Like she was not a monster. Inside the cell she watched, not with anger but confusion. This human wasn't afraid. Why? On the third day, Theo waved at her just like a neighbor, and again, she growled, a low warning sound, but not loud enough to scare him. He simply nodded and said, "You're not as scary as they say," with a chuckle. For the first time, her eyes narrowed with interest. Not hate. By the fifth day, she moved, not much, just a shift from her corner to the center of the cell. It was the first time in months she had changed position. When Theo saw this, he smiled wider. "I was starting to think you were a statue," he joked, laughing a little. The guards watching from the control room stared at the screen in disbelief. "She moved," one whispered. "She never moves," said another. The head warden ordered a lockdown, but it was too late. Something had already begun to change. Inside the cold walls of Cell 9, something warmer had entered, connection. The human didn't see her as a beast. He saw her as someone worth smiling at. She didn't understand it yet, but it touched something deep inside her. A piece of her that was not made for war or violence. A piece that had been forgotten, buried under chains and silence. She didn't know his name, and he didn't know hers. But in those quiet moments, when he cleaned the floor and played his music, she listened. And when he smiled, just for her, it felt like a crack had formed in the walls around her heart. For the first time in a long, long time, the next morning, the lights in Cell 9 flickered on like always. The alarms buzzed softly, reminding the guards to stay away. But today, the camera feeds were focused on one thing. Theo, the human janitor, had returned. As if nothing unusual had happened the day before, he walked calmly down the corridor, pushing his cleaning cart with the same rhythm. His tiny speaker played a soft human song, something old and slow. It echoed off the cold metal walls. Bouncing into her cell, she was already awake, sitting near the force field this time, closer than ever before. Chains still wrapped around her arms and ankles, but she had shifted. Watching, Theo didn't stop, didn't flinch. He saw her eyes following him and smiled again. Just like before, no fear, no force, just a simple, kind smile. He pulled out a cloth and started wiping the security panel outside her cell. "I hope the music's not too boring," he said without looking directly at her. Still no reply, but he knew she was listening. He could feel it, like the air had changed. One of the guards from the upper level whispered into the comm, "What is he doing?" Another answered, "Talking to her." Again. And they watched, stunned, as nothing bad happened. Theo finished cleaning and leaned casually against the wall near her cell. He looked up, meeting her glowing eyes once more. You ever get bored in there? He asked. Staring at walls all day must be tough. Silence. She didn't move, but something flickered behind her stare. Not rage, not warning, thought. Theo could feel it, and so he kept going. I'd lose my mind without someone to talk to, he said, scratching his chin. My boss thinks I talk too much anyway. Maybe that's why they stuck me on this level. He chuckled to himself, not expecting a reply. Then a sound stopped him cold. Not a growl, not a roar, a breath. Long, slow, deep, and close to the force field. He turned slightly and saw her face closer than ever before. She was only a few feet from the barrier now, kneeling, arms resting on her massive legs, chains dragging quietly as she moved. Her lips parted slightly. You talk? A lot, she said in a deep, rough voice. Theo's mouth fell open in shock. The voice was gravelly, unused, but real, and it came from the same creature that hadn't spoken in years. He laughed nervously, scratching the back of his head. Well, someone's got to keep the conversation going, he joked. To his surprise, her lips curled just slightly like a smirk. The guards watching froze in disbelief. She spoke, one whispered. She hasn't spoken in 3 years, another finished. Not since the battle. Theo had no idea what he had just triggered. All he knew was that her voice didn't sound like a monster's, it sounded tired. And lonely. What's your name? He asked gently. She looked at him for a long time, then turned her head slightly. No name, she said. Just number. Then I'll call you something else, Theo said without pause. How about Shade? She tilted her head, confused. You move like a shadow, he explained. Quiet, powerful, but not evil. For the first time in her life, someone had given her a name, not a number, not a weapon code. A name. Her expression didn't change, but something in her chest tightened. It was a feeling she hadn't known before. Theo waved and began packing his tools. I'll be back tomorrow. Shade, he said casually, and as he walked away, her glowing eyes followed him until he turned the corner. Back in the control room, the officers argued. We need to stop this, one said. It's dangerous. No, another whispered, watching the footage closely. It's working, because deep in that cold prison cell, the monstrous legend of XG-49 had begun to crack. And in its place, Shade was being born, not with violence, not with war, but with something no alien had dared give her before. A smile. The next day, Theo walked slower than usual. Not because he was tired, but because something inside him felt heavier. Shade had spoken. She had looked at him, not with rage, but with understanding. And now, he couldn't stop thinking about her voice. Deep and broken. When he reached cell 9, he noticed something was different. Shade was already sitting close to the force field, waiting, not curled up in the corner like before. Her chain still held her arms and legs, but her eyes, those glowing blue eyes, looked curious. You're early today, Theo said with a small grin. He leaned against the wall beside the cell and slid down to sit. This time there was no music, no small talk, just silence between them. A silence that felt like it was holding something deep and heavy. You want to know what I am? Shade said quietly. Her voice was low, raw, like old metal creaking under pressure. Theo looked at her and nodded gently. Only if you want to tell me, he replied. Shade didn't look at him when she began. Her eyes stared far away, like watching ghosts in the air. I was made in a lab, she said, not born, not raised. Just made? Theo listened without a word. She continued. Scientists called it Project Titan Core. They wanted weapons that couldn't be stopped. Soldiers that couldn't feel. Her hands moved slowly, chains rattling as she raised one massive arm. They gave me bones of carbon steel, muscles that don't tire. But they forgot one thing. She looked at Theo now. They didn't give me a soul, they tried to take it instead. Theo's smile faded. He saw now she wasn't just large or powerful, she was hurt, used like a tool, locked away like a mistake. I killed because they told me to, Shade said. Not because I wanted, but because I didn't know anything else. She touched her chest gently. But one day, I didn't follow the order. Theo's eyebrows raised slightly. What happened? He asked, her eyes darkened. They told me to destroy a group of rebels, but I saw children there, small, weak, afraid. Her voice trembled slightly. I dropped my weapon and walked away. They called me broken, defective, unfit, she said. They chained me, locked me, and left me in here. Her fists clenched, but her voice didn't rise. I haven't spoken to anyone since that day. Not until you. Theo felt his throat tighten. This giant creature wasn't a monster. She was a survivor, punished for showing mercy. He couldn't believe how alone she had been. "I'm sorry," Theo said softly. "You didn't deserve that." Shade tilted her head. Surprised. "No one's ever said that to me," she said. "Not even once," Theo leaned forward. "Well, now someone has." He smiled. "And I mean it." The silence between them wasn't empty now. It was full of something new. Trust. Shade's eyes dropped to the floor. "You remind me of one of the lab workers," she said. "He was kind, gave me books when no one was looking." She paused. "They made him disappear." Theo shook his head. "Not this time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She stared at him for a long moment. "Why?" She finally asked. "Why do you care?" Theo stood up, stretching his legs slowly. "Because I've been alone too," he said. "Not in chains, but in other ways." He looked at her, straight into those glowing eyes. "And I know how it feels to be seen as nothing, until someone treats you like someone." Shade didn't speak again, but she didn't need to. Something had shifted in her eyes, something softer. Not weakness, never weakness, but something stronger than armor. Connection. Theo walked away when his shift ended. But this time, Shade spoke before he left. "Tomorrow," she said, "will you come back?" "Earlier?" Theo turned, surprised, and smiled wider than before. "You got it, Shade," he said. "See you soon." And as he disappeared down the corridor, the towering shadow sat alone again. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt like a person, and the chains around her didn't feel as heavy anymore. Theo didn't bring music today. He didn't bring jokes or stories either. He brought something different, something simple, something human. He brought food not for himself but for her, wrapped in a soft cloth, warm steam rising. The scent filled the cold hallway outside Cell 9. The guards raised their eyebrows as he passed, but no one stopped him anymore. They had seen the recordings. They had watched her move, speak, and even smile, something they once believed impossible. Theo walked slowly, his steps echoing. Shade was already awake, sitting near the barrier, her hands resting calmly on her knees. The chains still clinked with every slight movement, but there was no tension in the air today, only silence and something else, expectation. As Theo approached, he knelt down beside the force field and placed the cloth-wrapped bundle gently on the floor. He didn't say anything right away, just pushed it a little closer to the barrier and leaned back. Shade watched him, her glowing eyes blinking slowly. "What is that?" she asked, voice low and curious. Theo smiled. "It's called bread," he said. "Old Earth style, soft on the inside, crunchy on the outside." She tilted her head, confused. "Why?" she asked again. "I didn't ask for it." "You didn't have to," Theo said. "But I thought maybe you were hungry for something other than silence." Shade stared at the food like it was a trick. No one had ever given her something without needing something in return. Weapons, experiments, obedience. Her entire life had been about usefulness, not kindness. Theo stood and pressed a few buttons on the wall panel. A small access drawer slid open, a transfer chamber between the outside and her cell. He placed the food inside and closed the door. Seconds later, it opened inside her side of the cell. She didn't touch it at first. She just stared at the steam rising off the bread. The smell was new, warm, strange, but inviting. Theo watched patiently from outside. Shade reached out slowly, her massive fingers shaking a little. Not from fear, but from memory. The last time she had tasted real food was... She couldn't even remember. She brought the bread to her mouth and took a small bite. Her eyes widened slightly and she froze. The flavor was soft, rich, and unlike anything she'd had in the cold nutrient blocks they pushed through the wall chute. "It's good," she said softly. Theo grinned. "That's a high compliment from a war-built giant." She didn't growl this time, didn't glare. Instead, she took another bite as she ate. Theo sat down on the floor again, legs crossed. He didn't speak, didn't rush her. He just sat there, letting her be human in her own way. Shade finished the last bite and leaned back. She looked down at her hands, then up at him. "No one's ever done that," she said. "No one's ever fed me like that." Theo looked at her. "Then I guess someone had to be first," she exhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in years. The chains didn't feel as tight. Even though they hadn't moved, her chest felt lighter, her mind quieter. "Why do you do this?" she asked. "You could walk away. You don't need to be here." Theo looked up at the ceiling, thinking for a moment. Maybe I do need to be here, he said softly. Maybe we both do. She didn't answer, but something shifted in her again. Something small but powerful. From the shadows of fear and steel, trust was blooming, not fast, not loud, but real. The guards didn't know what to make of it. Some called it foolish, others called it dangerous. But the head warden, after watching the recording, said nothing. He simply whispered, "Let it continue." Theo stood as his shift ended, brushing crumbs off his pants. "I'll bring something new tomorrow," he said. Shade gave him a small nod. "I'll be here," she replied as he walked away. She looked at the empty cloth beside her. She folded it carefully, placed it on the ground beside her chains, and then she smiled, not wide, not bright, but true. It was not hunger she had felt all those years. It was starvation for kindness, and now, for the first time, she had tasted something more than food. She had tasted hope. The day started like any other. Theo walked down the corridor, a soft tune playing from his pocket speaker. He carried no weapons, no armor, just a warm meal and a gentle smile. To the guards, he was just a janitor, but to Shade, he was something much more. She was waiting as usual, sitting cross-legged inside her cell. Her chains still bound her limbs, but they no longer felt like prison walls. They were only metal now, not purpose, not identity. And today, her eyes glowed a little softer, a little warmer. Theo placed the food into the transfer chamber. Just like before, bread again, but this time with fruit. "Something sweet for a change. You humans eat strange things," she said with a smirk. "You say that like it's a bad thing," Theo replied. Grinning, their moment was quiet, warm, simple, until the light suddenly flickered, then went out. Everything turned black a second later. Red emergency lights lit the corridor. A loud alarm screamed through the walls. Containment breach. Block D, multiple cells opened. Theo spun around, his heart racing. From down the hall he heard shouting, the clatter of boots, and the unholy screeches of freed prisoners. The emergency lockdown hadn't sealed fast enough. Cells meant for violent aliens had been opened. Shade stood up behind the force field, chains rattling. Her eyes glowed brighter now, focused and alert. Theo's hands shook. "I need to get out," he muttered. "They'll be coming." He turned to run. Too late. 3 alien prisoners rounded the corner at full speed. One with sharp claws, one with a metal pipe. The third with eyes full of hate. Theo backed away, slipping on the floor, falling hard. His back hit the wall near Shade's cell, and the creatures closed in. "Back off," he shouted, holding up his hands, but they didn't listen. He was unarmed, alone, and to them he was prey. Then it happened. With a roar that shook the metal walls, Shade moved. She yanked at her chains. Once, twice, and they snapped. Her massive hands slammed into the force field from the inside. Again and again the energy flickered, bent, and then shattered in a burst of sparks. The guards in the control room screamed, "Cell 9 breach. She's out! She's out!" But Shade didn't attack Theo. She didn't run. She stood over him. Between him and the attackers, her back to him, arms wide. A living shield. The aliens stopped cold. They had seen her before, on warfields, in memories, in nightmares, but now, she wasn't a weapon controlled by scientists. She was angry. And free. One alien lunged anyway, swinging the pipe. Shade caught it midair, crushed it like dry wood. With a sweep of her arm, she threw the attacker across the hallway. The others turned to run, but she didn't chase them. She knelt beside Theo, breathing hard. "Are you hurt?" she asked, voice deep but soft. Theo's hands trembled as he looked up at her. "No," he said quietly. "You saved me." Shade stood again, chains dragging behind her, broken and clinking. More guards arrived at the far end of the hall, weapons drawn. "Target loose," one shouted. "Prepare to fire." "No," Theo screamed, stepping in front of her, arms wide. "She protected me. She didn't hurt anyone." The guards hesitated, weapons shaking. The head warden himself arrived seconds later. Breathing heavily, he looked at Theo, then at Shade, who now stood still, arms at her sides, not resisting. "What happened?" the warden asked coldly. Theo pointed. "She broke her cell to save me, not to escape." The hallway went silent. Even the alarm seemed quieter for a moment. The warden stared at Shade, his face unreadable. Finally, he said one word, "Stand down," and the guards slowly lowered their weapons. Theo turned back to Shade, still shaking from the rush. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. Shade looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "You gave me food," she said. "But more than that, you gave me a reason to care." For the first time in years, The giant wasn't seen as a monster. She was seen as a protector, a person, a soul, and though the walls of the prison still stood, a bigger wall had just been broken, the one inside everyone's mind. The story spread like fire across the station. Before the next cycle began, everyone was talking about it. The monster from Cell 9, the war giant, the towering shadow, had protected a human. She didn't kill, didn't escape, didn't attack, she saved, and the whole station didn't know how to handle that. In the control room, the head warden stared at the screen, replaying the moment over and over. Shade standing between Theo and death. The guards looked at him, waiting for orders, but he said nothing. He just leaned back and whispered, "This changes everything." Down in the lower cells, Shade sat quietly. Not in her old cell, but in a temporary chamber. Without chains, without force fields, the cameras still watched her, but not with the same eyes now. They watched with curiosity, not just fear. Theo arrived late that day, escorted by 2 armed guards, not to protect him from Shade, but to protect Shade from those who still didn't believe her. He walked in, slow, thoughtful. No jokes this time, no music, just a look of tired relief. She stood when she saw him. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice softer than ever. "I should ask you that," Theo replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "They locked you up again." Shade gave a small shrug. "Better than a bullet," she said quietly. Theo sat across from her, separated by only a table now. Not a force field, no chains. No walls, just space and doubt between them. "They're scared," he said. "But not in the same way as before." Shade looked down at her hands. The ones that had once been used for destruction. "I've lived my life as a weapon," she whispered. "I don't know how to be anything else." Theo leaned forward, eyes steady. "You already are something else," he said. "You just don't see it yet." Outside, not everyone agreed. Some of the crew shouted for her to be executed. Others wanted her locked up forever. But a small voice began to rise, a new voice, support. An alien medic stepped forward and said, "I saw her push back the attackers with care. She could have killed, but she didn't." A junior engineer posted on the internal feed, "If that human believes in her, maybe we should too." And slowly, the station began to turn, not all at once. Not loudly, but moment by moment, thought by thought. The monster in their minds was fading. In its place stood something strange and powerful, a possibility. The warden called a meeting. Theo stood before the command council, his voice shaking but strong. "She could have crushed me," he said. "She could have walked away and let me die." He paused, then added, "But she didn't. She protected me, not because she had to, but because she chose to." One of the council members, an old insectoid with sharp clicking mandibles, growled, "She's still dangerous." Theo nodded. "So are we all," he replied. "But danger without choice is one thing. She chose peace that night." Theo visited Shade again. This time no guards followed. She looked up when he entered but didn't speak. He sat down beside her in silence. After a while she asked, "Do you think they'll let me out?" Theo didn't answer right away. "I think," he said slowly, "they're starting to see you, not just fear you." Shade sighed, a sound full of things she couldn't explain. "I don't know how to live outside," she admitted. "I don't know where I belong." Theo turned to her. "Maybe you don't have to figure it out alone." She looked at him sharply, surprised. "No one's ever said that to me before." "Well," Theo smiled, "I guess I'll just have to keep being the first, somewhere far away." Alarms continued to beep, systems continued to run, but inside that quiet room something more important was happening. A war-born giant and a soft-spoken janitor were rewriting everything. Not with weapons, not with commands, but with small, human moments that changed the way people saw monsters. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to change the galaxy. They didn't call her a monster anymore. Not in whispers, not in reports, not even in silence. Her name was Shade, and that name had begun to spread. From lower decks to upper towers, from engineers to command staff. People started to say it with something new in their voices, not fear. But respect. It didn't happen in one day. But it happened. The council met again. One final time. The head warden stood before them, silent for a moment. He placed a small recording on the table. It showed Shade shielding Theo with her own body during the riot. It showed her choosing restraint, choosing to protect. Then the warden said softly, "She's more than her design." No one spoke for a while. Then a decision was made, not by force, not by vote, but by change. They would let her walk free with restrictions, with guidance but not behind chains. The message reached Shade in her quiet holding room. Theo was there when they told her. For a long time she didn't react, she just stared at her hands. The same hands that once broke machines, now still and calm. I can go? She asked slowly. Theo nodded, smiling. Yes, you're free. Her glowing eyes blinked once, then again. I don't understand, she whispered. What does that even mean? It means you get to choose, he said. Where to go, what to do, who to be. Shade stood up slowly. No more force fields, no more guards aiming weapons at her. For the first time, the doors opened for her. Not to trap her, but to release her. The hallway felt longer than before. Every step she took was heavy, not with fear, but with memory. Each clang of her footsteps echoed louder. Aliens peeked from corners. Crew members watched from windows. No one ran, no one shouted, they watched. And in their eyes, curiosity, awe, and something deeper, change. As she walked past one maintenance crew, a young alien girl stepped forward. In her tiny hand she held a flower, fabricated, artificial but beautiful. Shade stopped, staring down at her. The child trembled but didn't run. She lifted the flower high and said, You're really big. Shade slowly knelt, her massive size folding down gently. Yes, she said, I am. The girl smiled. That's cool. Then placed the flower in Shade's palm. Shade didn't know what to say. So she said nothing. She just smiled gently and nodded. Theo stood at the end of the hallway. Watching it all, he didn't say anything either, because he knew this was bigger than words. Later that day, a shuttle was prepared. Shade was offered a place on another station, somewhere safer, quieter, but she turned it down. I want to stay here, she said, not because I have to, but because this is where I found myself. The head warden nodded slowly. Then we'll make room for you, he said, not as a prisoner, but as a citizen. And so Shade began again. She didn't become a soldier, didn't return to war. She worked in the lower sections, repairing damaged walls, lifting heavy cargo. Sometimes, she even helped calm new prisoners. They listened to her, not because she was big, but because her voice carried weight without shouting. She lived in a converted space near the gardens, a peaceful area where stars could be seen through the ceiling dome. She liked it there. It reminded her that there was always something bigger than chains and war, hope. One evening, Theo visited her with 2 cups of something warm. He handed one to her and sat beside her on the bench. Shade looked at the stars above and asked, Why did you smile at me that first day? Theo took a sip and shrugged. I don't know, he said. You looked lonely, she chuckled, a sound no one had ever heard from her before. I was, she said, until you came. They sat in silence, not as janitor and giant, not as guard and prisoner, but as friends. And when a shooting star crossed the glass above them, she didn't make a wish, because for the first time in her life she didn't need one. She already had what she never knew she was searching for. Freedom, not just from chains, but from the lie that she was only a weapon. Now she was something else entirely. She was Shade, and she walked free.